Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Troy Lambert, the Education Lead at Plottr, and today we're going to talk about the Story Genius storytelling system. Now, in Plottr, that consists of a number of different templates that you're going to use that will help you tell your story in a more compelling way. Now, before we get started, I want to preface this video by saying that this comes from the Story Genius book written by Cron. We've also done a couple of book clubs where we go through this book chapter by chapter. Everybody works through the homework together, and we then come out with a blueprint for our stories based on what we've learned throughout the course. I would highly recommend that before you start using this template, you at least become familiar with the book. If not, do all the homework and exercises within the book, or when it comes around, join one of our book clubs where we study through Story Genius again. That will really help you to fully understand the system before using this template. But this video is designed to walk you through exactly what that would look like. So with that, let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is come into your Plottr dashboard and you're going to choose Create from Template. Then you're going to scroll down to the project templates. Now, the only way to access the Story Genius plot guide is through the project templates. It's not one of the starter templates. So when you're starting your work, you want to select the Story Genius plot guide. Then this is going to pop up and show you the beats and the scene cards that are going to appear in the Story Genius plot guide. This is where you're going to start, okay? So we're going to create a project. And our project, we're going to name in this case, Story Genius Demo, okay? So we're going to go ahead and create a new project. What's going to happen is Plottr is going to open that new project. Now, once the document is open, you're going to want to look at something else. There are a couple of ways that you can do this. One way is that you can add a template down here on this plot line and add an additional plot line. Now, this additional plot line is going to be called Story Genius within the starter templates. What this timeline really is some instructions on what to do with the rest of this template. So we're going to take a look at those at the same time. Once you've used the Story Genius system a couple of times, you won't need to reference this plot line as much, but this is what we're going to call the pre-writing plot line. Okay, so we're going to choose that and add that to the file as well. Okay, now when we go through this, we're going to go through it in a series of pre-writing exercises. All of those you're going to record in Plottr before your story even begins. So you notice the first at the top here is the pre-writing plot line. Okay, and this is where you're going to write some pre-writing scenes. Okay, some scenes that happen before your book even starts. Okay, then you're going to look at potential plot problems. Then you're going to start coming up with ideas, and then ideas that make sense that you're going to romp around with a little bit, and then you're going to move on to developing scenes. Okay, but we're going to walk through all of those steps. So the first thing with Story Genius is you are going to start with the first pinprick of your idea. Now, sometimes this will be the idea of the character comes to you first. Sometimes the idea for the story grabs you first, and you have to find a character that would fit that. But this is where you write this down somewhere, typically in this scene card or another one that says my first pinprick on a separate plot line, whatever you want to do, or stack one under this one. But you're going to say, you're going to ask yourself, did the idea of the character come to you first? And what about each of the things, the story idea and the character, grabbed your attention? Now, these are the two things that you need to have in mind to really have an idea, is some kind of a story idea, some kind of a story problem, and some kind of a character. And maybe the initial idea, the initial pinprick, is just a situation that a character would find themselves in. In one of my books, the first part of the book came to me as a dream in the middle of the night, and it was a story about a guy who was driving to work and a body fell off an overpass and landed on his car. And that was the first hook. That was the first part of the book, and that's what grabbed me first, and then information about him as a character. So that's just an example. How things come to you may be different than that. Okay, but you're going to ask those questions. Then the next question you're going to ask yourself is, why do you care? And you're going to actually write down why you care about this story and the main character in it. Now, one of the reasons that we write this down is because we want to know what drives us to write this story, and we want to know why you're the person who needs to write this story. So on those days when it gets hard, when you're in the middle of writing this story, you can look back at your drive and your reason and your motive for writing the story, and the reason you need to be the one who writes this story, and that can serve to be very motivating to you on those really rough days that will happen while you're going through the drafting process. Okay? Now, it also, though, gives you the knowledge of you as a writer and what your connection to the story is. Well, then after that, you're going to ask yourself, what is the point of your story? What do you want your readers to go away thinking about? See if you can nail the point of your story down in 2 to 3 concise sentences, and relate this back to the character and ideas that first grabbed you. So usually, when you start looking at the character, the initial character, and you start looking at the idea that you had, those two things will come together and they will form some kind of a theme or a point of the story. What is this story really about? And that story is usually really about an internal struggle that is impacted by external events. And we're going to look at that a little more in just a little bit. Okay? Now, we're going to say, what is your what if next? Now, this is going to be a little more detailed. You're going to write a detailed and specific what if for your character and story. Give it context, a surprise, and some conflict that leads to consequences that will hit on the internal struggle your character is experiencing. Example from Story Genius, this is the example that she used, is what if a woman who spent her whole life believing she successfully hedged her bets against love is on the verge of losing everything? The one person she's felt close to, her lifelong career, and her grasp on reality. She's mad with grief. She's come to has one choice to set things right, but first she must convince those around her that she's not suicidal. So she devises a scheme to steal a dog for an hour or two, believing that getting a dog will reassure people in her life that she's back on the path to emotional stability. But when she can't get rid of the dog, she's forced to confront the fact that the very thing she spent her life avoiding, connection, is what makes the inevitable grief of loss endurable. So this is a really detailed what if. Now notice there's some details of the story in there, but not very many. Really what we're looking at here is an explanation of her inner struggle, and added onto it at least one event that's going to impact that inner struggle. Okay, so this is your what if. You can take as much time as you need to write this what if. And some of these you may have to go through some of these other steps we're going to talk about before you get a solid grasp on your what if. So if you're going through these lessons and these scene cards in this order, sometimes you might have to skip ahead a little bit, understand a little more about your character, and then come back and write your what if after that. Okay? Now, the next question, write a thumbnail sketch of who your character is before the story starts. Who is this person on the inside? What do they believe? And what do they want? And what are they in life before the story starts? Now, the place that you want to put this once you have written it is in the character tab. Okay? Within the character tab, when we create a new character, we're going to say this is your main character. And there will be other characters that you want to do this for as well. Okay? We're going to just pop them in a main character category. But we're going to add a template. And we're going to add the Story Genius template in the character tab as well. Okay? Now, when we do this, we're going to see these questions that are in the guide. What is your character like before the story starts? Who is this person on the inside? What do they believe? What do they want? And where are they in life before the story starts? So all of the questions about character, you can either answer right here, or you can write those separately and then copy and paste them into your character area in Plottr. Now, the reason to have them in your character area in Plottr is then you can refer to them as you're going through the drafting and writing process. And you can see what you've written about your character, what you already understand about your character. If what you understand about your character changes, you can edit it and make note of it here, right here in Plottr without having to delete it. So the next question we're gonna ask is, what does your character already want? There's probably something that they want that's related to this story. So write a short paragraph about what your character enters the novel wanting. Be as specific as possible, even if the character doesn't think they have a chance of getting it. Still list it. You can even make a list of things that your character wants here. Just remember to be very specific. Lisa talks about this a lot throughout the book, how generalities really kill your understanding of your characters in your story. So be very specific whenever possible. Okay? Now, why does your character want it? This goes down to motive, right? What does your character want? That's kind of their goal. That's what they would like to have, what they want. Then why does your character want it? Why does your character want it? And what will it mean to your character to get it? What does she think it will say about her? What does he think it'll say about him? Okay? So the motive of your character wanting something, and this is an internal want, an internal motive, is they want something because they feel like this will either offer them validation or it will offer them something else that they're searching for. Okay? And that's what brings us down to, what is your character's misbelief? What is the misbelief your character has that's preventing them from getting what they want? What is the fear fueling this misbelief? Given the misbelief, what is the very worst thing that could happen according to your character? That very worst thing should happen within your story. Okay? But the next thing we need to understand is, where does that misbelief come from? Write a paragraph or two about the moment your character's misbelief took root. This is a defining moment that will constantly be at war with the character's desire or what they want in this book. Remember, desire plus misbelief is going to create that compelling character. And then how is their misbelief holding them back from getting their desire? Determine how their misbelief is holding them back from getting what they want, and be as specific as possible. Be as specific as possible. Okay, once you've filled all those things out about your character, and you may have more than one character that you want to fill those out about, and you may have several characters that you want to fill that out about, but primarily we're talking about your protagonist here. Okay, so we've already done these steps down here about character, but then we're going to write the misbelief triggering scene. So first, we're going to ask ourselves, when did the character's misbelief take root? What is the triggering event? Now, a lot of times this is something that happened in their childhood, or was a traumatic event that happened to them that changed their worldview. Okay? Now, you just go, what did my character originally go into this scene believing? Now, this is the misbelief triggering scene. What did they go into this misbelief triggering scene believing? What existing healthy belief does this misbelief topple? In fact, maybe they thought that they could count on their parents and their parents would be there forever, and their parent either left or their parent was killed, something like that. So, initial belief, love is safety. Misbelief, love destroys. Okay? Now, why does the character have that initial belief? What experience originally taught the character that old belief, such as the belief in that love equals safety? Okay? And sometimes you can show that in the scene through a parent showing love before something bad happens to them, or something along that line. Okay? And what does your character initially want to achieve in this scene? What do they want in the particular scene that you're showing? Okay? And what does my character expect will happen in the scene? This is different from the initial goal. Your character expects a certain outcome based on the goal. What is that outcome exactly? The character must struggle between what they expected to happen and what is actually happening, or what actually happens. Okay, so you're going to write this whole scene. This is not a scene that's going to show up in your book probably 90% of the time. This is a scene so that you understand your character and where they're coming from. Because the argument is that you never come into any situation without a backstory, and your character never comes into the book without a backstory. And a lot of that backstory explains why they do the things that they do. Okay? So you can write that misbelief-triggering scene. Now you can write it here. Now that you've answered all those questions, write the entire scene, capture the moment when your character's misbelief took root, and color the worldview moving forward. Do this in the Story Genius plot guide template. So there's a place for this in the plot guide template, and that is right up here in the pre-writing stage where it says write the misbelief-triggering scene. Okay, and there's some notes here that are designed to help you write this scene. Okay, this scene is part of pre-writing. It's not going to appear in your book, or the information found in it can help reveal more about your character's backstory woven throughout the book. But usually this scene itself does not appear in the book. It happens long before the book ever happens, or before the book even starts. Write the scene in first person. The only reason we say this is it's easier to write the scene in first person in this particular case. It helps you to be closer to the reader, helps the reader to be closer to you as the author, to be closer to your character. And then, even if you're going to switch to third person for the rest of your book, write this scene in first person as if this is happening to you. Now, answer each question below and use your answers to write the scene. And this is what we talked about in that other scene card. So it provides you with these questions here. Okay? So, write the misbelief-triggering scene. Okay? Then the next thing you're going to do is create 3 crossroads scenes that reinforce that misbelief. So once you establish what the misbelief is, then you're going to write at least 3 more scenes. Now, these are scenes that probably are not going to be in your book as well. Sometimes the third one will be. If this is a series, one of these scenes could have happened in a previous book, because each book your character is going to deal with a different misbelief, a different desire, and that's what's going to drive them forward in the book. Okay, so throughout your character's life, they've made several turning point decisions that have been guided by the misbelief you established in the previous scene. Sketch them out. Nail down only 3 crucial moments for your character, and consider these moments need to have the following: external events that in some fundamental way, due to intense internal conflict, caused the character's misbelief to deepen, had to make a decision that had escalating ongoing ramifications that further confirm their misbelief, and it must yield the most story-specific information for the story you're writing right now. Now, we recommend you sketch these scenes in chronological order, in the order they would have happened in your character's life. The reason is the way it works generally is the misbelief is reinforced by scenes that get more and more difficult or more and more triggering of the misbelief. Now, once you sketch them out on the scene cards in the Story Genius plot guide, write the scenes fully, either here in the scene cards or in a character template provided, or to put it into a note or link a Google Doc or link a OneDrive document here. Okay, and be sure to write them in chronological order as well, because that'll help your understanding of your character and their backstory. Really, you're building your character backstory here. So we're going to write those 3 crossroads scenes. Okay, and now we're going to go back to our instructions, and we're going to look at, after we've got those 3 scenes, then we're going to look at what is the obvious plot problem of the story. So we're going to free write in some scene cards some potential external plot problems of your story. Now remember, when you're writing character-driven stories, the external plot problems are the most interchangeable things in the world. You can have almost any plot problem as long as it butts up against your character's misbelief and their desires. So once you know those things, you can tie your plot problems to the internal conflicts, and you can create a whole bunch of them. Okay, and then you do the plot problem test. You see if your obvious plot problem passes this test. Pardon me. Can your problem sustain an entire novel from the first page to the last? So is this a big enough problem for the size of story you're writing? You can do this work for short stories as well. Just understand that then you're dealing with a smaller problem a smaller misbelief? And then, is there a real-world specific impending consequence that this escalating problem will give my character no choice but to face? One of the things is impending consequences. There needs to be a timeline. A timeline where if this is not resolved by, your character will have to face something. Okay, so is there a clear-cut deadline, a ticking clock counting down to that consequence? There really needs to be doing that. Okay, so you give your plot problem that test. Okay, and you're going to record those plot problems up here on the potential plot problems. Okay, and then this gives you some more keys. Make sure the problem is the overall big problem, one will take the entire novel to solve. Make sure the problem solidly hits the third rail of your character's misbelief and desires. Make sure the external problem will take plenty of work to solve and will cause your character internal and external conflict. If you have several ideas, pre-write a scene card about each, labeling it OEPP. You can label it whatever you want. Just set it apart from other problems you will add to this idea time and evaluate it based on the criteria we talked about. Trust your instincts and choose the problem that you want to write and that will make your character and therefore your reader consider their misbeliefs and cause them to face them head on. Okay? The problem helps define the theme and the direction of your story. Okay. Now, then we ask the question, when does your novel begin? So we're going to come up with a whole bunch of plot problems, and we're going to put them on this timeline. And what that will look like is you'll have several, and you can label those ones OEPP, and then plot problem, and sketch them out. And then this is just, the other ones might just be plot problem ideas. And what I usually do is then I use color to color these. If I eliminate that as an idea and I say, okay, this is one that just isn't going to work. In this case, I'm just going to turn that red. And if it's one that I think will work, maybe I'll turn it blue. And if it's the one that I think, or ones that I think really are the leaders, then I will turn them green. Okay, and in each of these scene cards, I will have written some notes about this plot problem and asked myself the plot problem questions. Okay, so that's one of the things that you're going to do. Okay, is you're gonna look at that. Okay, now then you're going to come up with a series of ideas. So you're going to put this idea list timeline. Now you're going to do this in kind of a specific order. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to create some potential plot points that will challenge your protagonist. That's what the ideas are. Okay? Now, so initially you're just going to add them to the idea list timeline. Okay? For any scenes you can actually visualize coming to life, and add those scene cards in the development timeline. Okay? And then between that is the romping around timeline. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute, okay? But you want to look at what secrets and lies follow your protagonist into the novel, what external obstacles have you already planted in the past that will keep your protagonist from their current goal, or possibly help them attain it. Write them down and add them to your idea list of scene cards, depending on how specific they are. And then 3 why test for plot points from the idea list. Does your plot need it to happen? Logistically, why can it happen? Is it actually possible? This leads to that believability, okay? And why would it happen given your protagonist's inner struggle? What would be the motivation for this happening? Okay? And those are all really important. So you're going to do that when you look at these plot points. Okay? Now, where you're going to add those is up on this ideas list. So this is the idea list timeline. These are ideas that are too fuzzy for you to conceptualize. You have a vague notion of what will happen, but no real specifics. Remember, generalizations kill your story and cause writer's block. Be as specific as possible with your ideas, but don't be afraid to add vague ones here and try to flesh them out. Now, once you flesh those out a little bit, then you can move these to romping around scene cards. Any scene that you can envision but doesn't seem to have a connection to your character's internal struggle yet, those are romping around ideas. Maybe you can find a way to connect them, maybe you can't, but throw those on this plot line and just leave them there. It's okay if you're not going to use them. Like I say, a lot of times what I'll do is the ones I'm not going to use, I will just change the color, at least temporarily. Eventually, I will go through and delete those. But temporarily, I'll just change the color to red. No, I'm not going to use this idea. Okay? And then scene cards are in development are the ones that you've demonstrated are story-specific and eligible for a place in your novel's cause and effect trajectory. Give them a scene number to help you put your ideas in chronological order. Rather than giving them a scene number, I generally just put them randomly here as they are in development, and then I'll move them up to this actual scene template when I feel like they're developed enough and they are ready to be put in a place in my novel. Okay? So once we've done that, then we're going to dig for subplots. Now, by digging for subplots, what we're doing is we're taking those idea lists, even the vague ones or the romping around ideas, and identify potential subplots that pop out at you. Make a list of potentials in order of appearance of your novel, or what you guess would be the order of appearance. Look at the list and identify any subplots already in play when your novel starts. And ask yourself, how will this subplot matter to my protagonist? People ask us about subplots all the time, and how many you should have. And the answer is, it depends, but all of them should have an impact, a direct impact on your protagonist. That's the most important thing. Okay, once you've determined some subplots, then are you ready to write your story? Well, maybe. Here's the thing. Be sure you've completed these steps and fully understand your character and their backstory. If you're a discovery writer, start to write your story with some of the ideas you've created in mind and take into account what you know about your character, their misbeliefs, and their desires. This will help you build that cause and effect type of a timeline. If you're a plotter, finish developing your plot with the ideas you've added to the Story Genius plot guide. Generally, what this means for you is that you may want to write a bunch of your ideas in the order that you think is going to happen in the story, and you're probably going to have more of them than will fit in the Story Genius plot guide. So pull those onto another timeline, and then you can use a different plot template to make sure that your plot and pacing is correct once you've developed your plot enough to understand where you think scenes are going to happen and stuff like that. Okay? Use the Story Genius scene template to ensure your scenes are necessary and answer all the necessary questions. So once you've decided a scene that is going to be in the book, you're going to use the Story Genius scene card template. That template is going to look like this. And it's going to have a few things you need to answer. The alpha point, the key role the scene will play in your novel's cause and effect trajectory. The alpha point must tell you why this scene is necessary and relevant to the story. The subplot. Fill this in when you name some plots you encounter and which character's subplot it is. For instance, if this scene follows a subplot, then hey, tell us what subplot that is. Okay? If you have a plot line for that subplot, because you've created a separate plot line for that, move this scene card there. Plot. What happens in the first part of the scene? That's the cause. What is the external consequence of what happened in the scene? And that's the effect. And then the third rail, this is what Lisa talks about a lot during her book. Why does what is happening matter to your protagonist? What realization does this event trigger within the protagonist to impact their desire and misbelief? This realization must lead to action. And action can either be a reaction on their part, or it can be them rushing forward to take action. But it's going to inspire something in your character, okay? And so, what must happen next as a result of what occurred in this scene? It needs to be a concrete, action-based event similar to the alpha point, because that's going to lead to the alpha point of your next scene. So it's all about cause and effect. So you're going to go through each scene and answer those questions. Now, if you're a discovery writer, what you may do is you may go through each of those scenes and ask those questions after you've written them, or after you've written several scenes. You may be going backwards with the scene template and checking your scenes and make sure they have all the parts that you need to make your story work. Now, I put here, continue to use the Story Genius tools in the revision of your work. As you go through and revise your work and it gets better, use the Story Genius tools to revamp your character profiles and knowing who your character really is. Use the different backstory elements to make your work even stronger and to help us as a reader make a connection with your character. And use those scene templates to check your work and make sure that your scenes belong in your book and that they have a strong purpose. And if you do that, your first draft will be much better. Or in the case of a discovery writer, if you've written a 0 draft, that second draft will be much better and much easier to write. Okay? So as a recap, the things that we have in the Story Genius method is first, the Story Genius plot guide. That can be found in the project files, okay, in the project templates. Start with the Story Genius plot guide. If you need it, use this pre-writing template, which is simply called Story Genius in the starter templates. Use this pre-writing template to go through the various different steps you're going to need to do some pre-writing and prepare yourself to write your novel. You can always, when you're done going through these instructions, you can delete this plot line. Okay? Then you're going to do all the pre-writing exercises, including the misbelief-triggering scene, writing the 3 crossroads scenes after you outline them, and then you're going to look at your plot problems and when your novel begins. Now, you're going to go through your pre-writing and you're going to add a lot of information about your character in Plottr. This information may change as you write, but you're going to add this information into Plottr. Now, once you've done your plot problem evaluations and you've determined which plot problem belongs and which one your book is going to be about, you're going to move down to your ideas list. Then you're going to separate those ideas into romping around ideas. They're kind of fun, but you can't get them to fit quite yet. And developing scenes. And these are scene cards that you know you're going to develop and they're going to belong in your novel. And once you got those scene cards in development and you move them up into your scene timeline, then you're going to use the scene card template to make sure each of those scenes belongs. Now, we've tacked on here at the end, this is a really quick structure. Lisa Cron is not big on story structure. She's big on discovering the story and understanding your characters as you go. Okay? But we put this together where there's about 6 different points that you should know along your, what we call the Story Genius blueprint. Okay? So this is the ordinary world for your character. And then we have the unavoidable problem. That is generally the hook. We understand what the problem is, but there hasn't been an inciting incident yet. Then there's an inciting incident. This is really where the story starts. This is where your character is drug along into the story. The midpoint, something changes. The dark night is the worst it can get. The aha moment is your character's realization of where they've gone wrong or of their misbelief and how they need to correct it. And then the resolution is your climax. Okay? And you can go through all of those, but generally speaking, at this point, you may also use another plot template to check your plot and pacing once you've set up all the scenes on your main plot line. And with that, everybody, that is the Story Genius system. We know it's a little complex, and we know it's going to be very, very helpful if you understand the book, or if you've gone through one of the book clubs with us, or a combination of those two things. This is going to be much easier for you to use. It's kind of an advanced group of templates, but if you follow the steps I've given you here, then you will be able to create a compelling story, the very best one that you can. And with that, everyone, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for more template videos and more instructional videos from Plottr. If you don't want to miss anything, be sure you hit that subscription button and hit that notification bell so that we let you know whenever a new video drops. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.